We finally made it. Under a week, we will know what the college football playoff looks like. But before, we have conference championships, and boy, I've heard hot takes already on this show. It's the Extra Point, and it starts right now. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the final episode of the semester of the Extra Point. As always, I'm your host, Griffin Barfield. With me today, we got four panelists ready to express what they think is going to happen in this weekend of college football. From left to right on the screen, Jordan York, Drew Landon, Brian Warner, and Caden Hughes. Guys, you all know the drill here. Welcome back. Excited to have you guys back. Excited to see what you guys have to say because we have 5 top 25 games. It's conference championship week, and almost every one of these conference championship matters for the college football playoff. So why don't we start with the one that maybe means the least? We got number 19 UNLV, and they're traveling to Boise, Idaho. This is the only game, the conference championship game, that is going to be hosted at a certain school. That will be at Boise State, who Ashton Jeanty, not the Heisman favorite anymore. It's Travis Hunter. But still, it is an incredible Boise State team that only has one loss to the best team in the country. UNLV, what a story that they've had. But who takes it at the end of the day?
All right, I'll lead this one off. I was long aboard the Ashton Jeanty for Heisman train, and then I saw Travis Hunter and his performance against OK State, and now I'm going to have to say that Travis Hunter is your Heisman. But I think the second best player in college football is for Boise State. So I think it's a Bronco stampede. I think Ashton Jeanty has a day. I think they benefit largely from the fact that it's at Boise because they went down to Vegas and they kind of struggled a little bit in UNLV. It was one of their best openings to the season they've had in ages. I think in Boise, in the cold, in possibly the snow, they're looking at snow being in the forecast for this game. I think that sets up for a running masterclass from Ashton Jeanty, and even though he's not going to get the Heisman, he's going to have a great last showing. And look for this Boise State team in the playoff, because their only loss, as Griffin just said, was by 3 points on the road at Oregon. And Oregon's the only team that hasn't lost a game. So I think this Boise State team not only wins a conference title, I think they go to the college football playoff semifinals, maybe even the Natty.
I agree. I love what you said about the snow, because I feel like in the snow, Boise State might be a top 5 team in college football. Jeanty, just the way he played, just run the ball 50 times with him in the snow. He's 340 yards shy of the rushing record, which he could hit that this year. If Boise State should have 2 games left, this one and stuff. To do that. Boise State already beat UNLV. It's hard to beat a team twice, though, but it is important to see. We got that film, and I think we're seeing the game. If UNLV's rush defense is very good, their pass defense isn't as good. Boise State's run game is so exceptional that doesn't even really matter. And then their pass game, it's not bad. They can take care of Boise State as well.
I think I'm going to jump right on with that. I'm going to say run, Ashton, run, because that's what it's going to be doing. Snow game, blue field, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Going to be just appealing to watch. It's going to be fun, cold. But it is tough. UNLV was the only team that found the cure to Ashton Jeanty, if you will. Even, I wouldn't even say cure. He still ran for over 100 yards and a touchdown. But he averaged 3 yards a carry. So I'm not going to say that they're going to stop him, especially now when you're in the cold. They were in UNLV. They were in Las Vegas. I think they play in the Dome. If at the very least, they play in the warm. Yeah. So, and I think it was also in September or October. So when you look at that, they didn't have the weather conditions on their side. We saw this week in Sunday Night Football, Buffalo Bills, because they're used to playing in the cold, because they're used to it, and 49ers coming from California weren't ready for it. It was the Cali boys. You saw that the weather's going to be a big factor, and if it does snow, which I believe it's looking like it's supposed to snow, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be a big game for Ashton. UNLV did have a good rusher. They also rushed for over 100 yards that game, way back on week 8. But I do have Boise State winning this one, and I think it will be larger win than the 29-24 victory back in week 8.
I think I agree.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with the rest of the panel. I have Madman Madsen on my board because if Madsen does anything but hand the ball to Ashton Jeanty, he is indeed a madman. This guy is for sure the second best player that is currently in college football. He is running for everything at the moment. He gives his heart every single game. He's a great performer, and he shows up when it matters most, and I believe he'll put up like 150 plus yards against UNLV.
I'll say real quick, I think it's so cool that, I mean, we'll see if they win, but Boise State historically I feel like has been like one of the more elite group of 5 programs in my lifetime. And now that we have a playoff format that allows group of 5 teams to make it, Boise State needed to be good this year. It's just so perfect and fitting that they get to kind of represent the group of 5 in this first playoffs and stuff. I love to see it. I think it'd be hilarious if they lose because of that. But yeah, I think it's awesome that they're this good, and I'll be cheering for them throughout the playoffs if they make it.
I think.
I about Seth, just for the Heisman campaign, that's what I was going to say. Because I think if he breaks the 340, he's got to win Heisman. You would be hated as
do it
a
after the
committee.
voting. When's the voting?
Voting's before the playoff.
Yeah,
Is it before the playoffs?
Yeah.
So he would have to run for 340.
It's like MLB.
Monday.
But do you think if he comes within 100 yards, if he could possibly break Melvin Gordon's? Maybe, depending on how good of a. We've seen him run for almost 300 yards.
Yes, the problem is what goes against Jeanty is the fact that all he does is run the ball. He can't do anything. If he did anything defensively, it wouldn't even be close.
Yeah, he's against a multi-dimensional.
But he's against the first two-way player since his coach. Like, I mean,
Yeah, but you also had like
Julius
Desmond
Peppers?
Howard, you had
No, he did a
Charles
little
Woodson. Like you've had players in the last 20 years. You've never had a player cross, at least come close to Barry Sanders like this. We did have Melvin Gordon back in 2014.
That was sick.
But he wasn't putting up almost 30 rushing touchdowns, averaging 8 yards a carry when there were 8+ men in the box.
yeah.
Like,
I mean,
that is ridiculous. You have 8 out of 11 players in a box within 5 yards of the man, and he's still averaging almost 10 yards a carry.
I mean, I think simply put, this is a guy you're looking at as like he's the new Derrick Henry. I mean,
You just passed him last week in rushing guard this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get his. You can do anything you want to stop him, he's going to get his.
Correct.
Derrick Henry, when he goes out on the field, you know he's going to get his. He's going to have an impact on the game. The point is to let everybody else not be the ones to beat you. You know you're probably going to get 150 yards, a couple touchdowns on Friday night in Boise, Idaho. But can UNLV stop everybody else and make it a 17-14 type game that they could steal one on the road and earn their spot in the college football playoff? I don't think so. I think Boise State is a lot better than people think they are. I think they're getting a lot of disrespect because they are a group of 5 team, and you look at their schedule. Outside of Oregon, they haven't really played anybody that's great. I think you're going to see a statement from Boise State on Friday, and I think it leads into bigger things when the playoff starts.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do really like this game a lot. This is why I believe that it is very nice that this game is a Friday game because based off what you think about UNLV or not, these are 2 incredible football teams. I mean, if you look at Boise State, their only loss is by 3 in Eugene to an Oregon team that nobody thought that they were going to beat. So, again, this is just an exciting game, and I'm excited to see if Boise State do win. I do believe that they do. I think home field advantage will play a huge factor in this. That going into the playoff, who are they going to knock off if they do knock off a team? I think that could be very exciting. But other 2 teams that could be quite exciting to watch in the college football playoff is the Big 12 champion. This game will be taking place in Dallas AT&T Stadium. Number 16, Arizona State, and number 12, Arizona State, which are 2 teams. Did I say Arizona twice? I think I did. Iowa State, Arizona State. Iowa State started the season off a little bit slower, or started off strong, best start to season history, and then 2 losses, and then they rattled 3 off. Arizona State have just been an exciting team to watch in terms of how they've been able to run the ball, their coaching staff. So one of these teams is going to make the college football playoff. Which team is going to be it?
Arizona State. It's the biggest turnaround in their program history. They were, 3-9 last year, or 10-2 this year. So that's incredible. I love their coach, Dillingham. I love what he's done in the portal, getting everyone to believe and stuff. I think it's amazing. And I mean, this is just a team that believes they can win any game and stuff. Like that, coming off of a 3-9 season, have the mentality that they've had and being able to back it up with wins and stuff, I think it's incredible. And I think they might be a scary playoff team. Shout out to Iowa State. I saw this too. They haven't won 10 games in their program history, so it's incredible they've done it for the first year. I didn't know that. I would assume they would have gotten at least a couple of years, you know. But yeah, I mean that's all I really have to say. Dillingham's a great coach. If I'm saying his name right, and Arizona State's a great program. I'm excited for the playoffs.
On that note, it's really surprising that they never did it when they had Brock Purdy for all those years.
Yeah.
Because Brock Purdy and Matt
Brees
Campbell.
Hall.
Or Brees Hall. They had Brock Purdy and Brees Hall together.
I forgot about Brees Hall. Yeah.
And they didn't win 10 games. So that's crazy to think about. I'm going to join right alongside you. I think Arizona State is back. I think Arizona State took a couple years off under Herm Edwards and then obviously a lot of turmoil in that program. But I think Arizona State is a great team. And we talked a lot about Ashton Jeanty. Cam Skatibo is a fantastic running back. Like, he is on an absolute tear right now. He had another 180 yards and 3 touchdowns against Arizona. I mean, this is a guy who you give him the ball, he's just fun to watch. He's not the type of runner that Ashton Jeanty is, but he's a playmaker, and that's what's more dangerous. And I said a few weeks ago about this Arizona State team, they were getting hot at the right time. Would they be able to sustain it when they played BYU, when they played Arizona, when they played those teams later on that were going to test them? The answer was a resounding yes, beating BYU and then absolutely destroying Arizona in that in-state rivalry game and planting the Devil's pitchfork at midfield. I think Arizona State's a lot of fun to watch, and I think this game is unique because neither team is really home. One fan base is coming from Iowa, one's coming from Arizona, and they're merging on Arlington, Texas. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but, you know, give me the Sun Devils.
Random jerseys of that game, you know. Yeah, random stream of colors and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, going off the pitchfork, I tried drawing it. It's not great drawing because my artistic skills aren't all there. But yeah, I feel like this team, they were 3-9 last year, as Caden said. I love a good underdog team that can go from being 3-9 all the way to 10-2. It's just a total flip of the program, flip it on its head, and now they have a flame under them. They're going to be like, their freshmen, sophomore, juniors are going to be like, hey, we were 3-9 last year. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's go all the way this year. And that's why I'm taking Arizona State in this game.
I'm going to shake it up.
Please
Because I want to. And I'm going to say
Let's
Iowa
shake
State.
it.
And I underline State because I want you to know this is not Iowa. They have an offense, all right? So I do not know much. I do know that both these programs were not good last year. They have flipped it around. They have looked much better this year. Arizona State has really been on fire lately. But I kind of want to go with my gut, and I'm going to say Iowa State. I kind of just feel like it's going to be Iowa State. I think they're going to kind of catch back up, get there. They did just take on Kansas State last week, who was a top 25 team. They're ranked 24th. They beat them by 8. But it wasn't like an impressive offensive showing. So I don't really know what I'm going to get from Iowa State, but I do think that they're going to somehow pull out a win, especially being on a neutral field. But I do think more Arizona State fans will probably be there just because it's closer. Like, you're coming from Iowa. I feel like Arizona's a little bit closer. But I don't know. I just think the Cyclones are going to take it. They're going to go out. I just want you to know it's going to be an offensive game. There's it's not Iowa. There's no punts.
sure.
There are no punts coming through.
It's still the Big 12, you know, at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Plus, Iowa State's the returner and Arizona State's the new one. So maybe Iowa State goes like, all right, buddy, slow your horses. You know, we're not going to let you win this. Just come in and walk over like some of these other conferences.
Yeah.
So
I think the biggest thing that Iowa State needs to be concerned about is if you look at their road to get here, they had about 6 games where their entire fan base had a heart attack.
Yeah.
And I feel like against Arizona State, you're not going to want to do that because Arizona State, they're one of the teams you don't want to get into a shootout with them. Their offense is among the most potent, not only in the Big 12, I would argue in the country. As I mentioned, Cam Skatibo is absolutely insane. I mean, nobody's had an answer for him, especially in the last 6 weeks when Arizona State's been winning. And I love what you brought up about Kenny Dillingham and the transfer portal, because Kenny Dillingham, I think, is one of the most underrated coaches. And I think he has created a culture there people are willing to buy into. And clearly it's translating into success. And this is a great sign for Arizona State. In their first year, they're going to this game. Look down the road. They're going to get a lot of commitments, and they'll be back here quite a few times. I think this Arizona State team has a very bright future.
I do think for Iowa State, though, one thing that I did forget, because I forgot even looking at it until Kate said 10-2. Like, they were 7-0, top 10. They lost 2 straight and now have won 3 straight. So they've seemed to maybe right the ship. Maybe they're starting to go in the right direction. But we still forget that this is only a 2-loss team. They were 7-0 to start the season. Like, they were on fire. They were a top 10 team. They were actually ranked above Clemson, I think, for a little bit. So it's going to be interesting. Both teams are on fire. They're kind of catching their ground. They're getting their feet up. The only thing I remember from the Arizona State game, other than the beatdown, is the mascot brawl. That's just because that's like the only thing running in my mind. And I was like, Arizona State won that one too.
The wild card with Iowa State is which team are you going to get?
Are you going to get the one that lost to Kansas? Or
I feel like for 7 weeks, everybody saw in Iowa State that was like, okay, they're winning, but they have not been impressive at all. Like, they were arguably the least impressive unbeaten team at the time when they were 7-0. Then they lost 2 straight, and it's like, okay, so anybody that can play football against them can beat them. But now you look, they just went and beat Kansas State, which I did not think that was going to happen. I thought K-State was going to win that game, and Colorado was going to find their way into the Big 12 title game. But that did not happen. Iowa State has, you could say they've turned a corner. I just think that Arizona State is white hot right now. I mean, I don't think there's any slowing them down. And maybe a couple weeks of rest before the playoff, they'll get a little rusty and they'll get beat by a better team. But I don't see anybody stopping Arizona State.
Arizona State's like sprinting into the championship. Iowa's kind of just like jogging.
Yeah,
They just kind of picked up.
Iowa State,
Iowa State just
chased, and they're
They
like
play
barely
steady.
fast enough. Yeah.
yes.
They play steady football.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, here's what I would say. It's like when you're running like steeplechase. And you're running and you're running and running, and then you're going to hurdle, and you get like tripped up on one of the hurdles, and then you fall, but then you get right back up.
Yeah.
Like, that's
that's kind of what Iowa State is.
Like Subway.
Like Subway, yeah.
yeah.
The cops behind Iowa State like this whole season.
like tip the train or something as you try to go.
exactly, yeah,
Didn't
they're-
swipe in
the whole
time.
season. Yeah, exactly.
I like the kid.
Yeah, they're barely out of it. Yeah.
But yes, I think it's gonna be a good game. I think it's
I
definitely.
think it's gonna be really fun to watch, and I think the time slot works really well. Because obviously there's bigger games later in the day, and we'll get to those here in a second. But I think a lot of people are going to watch this game, and they're going to see 2 surprisingly good teams. Teams that should be getting a lot more respect than just teams because they play in the SEC or they play in the Big Ten. The Big 12 is a legit conference.
As long as the sun is not setting on AT&T Stadium
Yeah.
during that time, which I don't think it will. That's why noon kickoff works great for this game. But again, like you guys are talking about, these are 2 good teams that are more under the radar because there's so much bias going around the SEC, around the Big Ten. You know, the ACC gets a little bit more publicity, but I mean, this is Arizona State's favored by 2. This is going to be a good game. Regardless, I think that this game could potentially be, down to a game-winning drive. Let's see which team has it, which makes me excited. But I agree with all your points there. We'll move on to probably the biggest game of the conference championships in terms of who is playing at the magnitude. This is basically a playoff game. Georgia, 5th in the country. Big win over Georgia Tech, and I couldn't even count how many overtimes that there were, but made an incredible comeback. They're facing Texas. Neutral site. It is in Atlanta, Georgia, so it does favor Georgia a little bit. I mean, we all saw that week 1 during the Aflac kickoff game. But Texas is looking for revenge. Georgia's their only loss. So a lot can go around here. Georgia may have that winning formula. But can Texas right the ship, turn it around, and win the SEC in their first time in the conference?
I love this game so much. I have the Texas Longhorns on my board, and it's Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, and then it goes down to defense. And I think the Longhorns are just the best at defense right now. They have some notable names back there, and I believe that the Longhorns are going to get it done in the end in 8 overtimes, as in quotations on my board.
I think I'm gonna jump right with it. Because I saw a lot of us picking this inning, but I was like, I'm gonna go Texas. It's been 7 weeks. Georgia has still kind of like, you don't know what you're gonna get out of Carson Beck. I mean, he did show up in the second half. You gotta give him credit. They scored, 14 points in the last 5.5 minutes. Yeah. They did find a way to pull out a victory in the clean, old-fashioned hate rivalry, which I love the name. But I'm going to go Texas.
More on the broadcast. Oh my gosh.
They should have.
They
love that name.
1,000 times.
It's a perfect.
It's incredible. It's an incredible name. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. But I think I'm going to go Texas. It's going to be tough because both these teams are coming in. It's obviously a neutral site. But it has been,
It's in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a neutral site.
Shoot.
Yeah.
So it's not really neutral. Okay.
Yeah.
Dang.
Neutral. It's neutral.
It's neutral.
It's how the Aflac kickoff game was, neutral.
It's as neutral as the Clemson-Georgia one. Yeah. But I do think Texas is going to be able to pull it off. I think they'll get their revenge. I don't think it stops Georgia from getting in the playoffs, but I do think Texas will get their revenge. They'll even out the series between this season, and I think they're going to take it. I think they're kind of on a streak right now. So
I absolutely agree, but I'm not super confident about this one. I've been flipping back and forth, and maybe I'll keep doing that. There's a long time before the game, so. But on the extra point, I'm going with Texas. I'll just tell you my rationale of why I'm conflicted and stuff. I think last time they played, it was Ewer's second game back from injury, and then Georgia got to him 7 times. I think that's just a terrible recipe for a quarterback, no matter who it is and stuff. And then I think that Georgia, coming off the Georgia Tech game, they looked weaker. I don't really care. They took care of business, and so I'm not super concerned about that. Obviously, it's hard to beat a team twice. And like I said, Georgia sacked him 7 times last year, and I think in the NFL, you see all the time. In the playoffs, what matters the most is a quarterback and a pass rush. I think as we, this is our first year of a 12-team playoff. I think when it's all in 5-10 years from now, we'll look at the college football the exact same way. Unlike there's 12 teams that make it, and then the teams that win in the playoffs are the teams with a quarterback and a pass rush. I don't know about a quarterback, but Georgia definitely has a pass rush. So I could see that being a recipe for them I could see in the first quarter, Ewers is on his butt multiple times, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a horrible game for Texas. With that said, though, I think Steve Sarkisian in big games is an amazing play caller. I think he reaches deep into his bag when he absolutely has to, and I have faith in him. I think he's going to have a great game. I think Sark's going to win it for him, and so that's why I have Texas. But again, I can change my mind tomorrow. Yeah.
I've made my dislike for Texas very clear over the course of this semester. But I have to give credit where credit's due. They're pretty good. They have one of the best defenses in football. Sark is an incredible coach. I feel like anybody who's come under that Nick Saban tree, you can put that moniker beside their name, just they become an incredible coach. And I think they've got probably one of the best O-line in the country and a pretty solid quarterback. But this game's in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Georgia kind of has a history in Atlanta. They've played in a national championship in Atlanta. They did not win that national championship. They've played in quite a few SEC championships in Atlanta. They don't lose those unless they're playing Alabama. They are not playing Alabama, despite the fact they're playing Steve Sarkisian. The question is Carson Beck trustworthy?
No.
And
that's an easy question.
When you look at what he had done to start this season, he wasn't. Not at all. He had a good game against Clemson, then kind of disappeared. Yep. Against Alabama, he was non-existent for 2.5 quarters. Came back and obviously had the great rally, but they still lost the game. And then when things became public about him dating Hannah Cavender, his stats were worse than Tommy DeVito's. I mean, they just...
Griffin took a shot.
Whoa. Sorry, Griffin.
It's when she tweeted out quarterbacky. Oh, he's so quarterbacky or whatever.
I mean, they're worse than Davis Warren's, worse than any Michigan quarterbacks. They were just awful stats. But that Tennessee game, Carson Beck turned a corner. He did not turn the ball over. He didn't turn the ball over against UMass, and he did turn it over in the first half against Georgia Tech, but he didn't in the second. They had 15 different chances to lose that game to Georgia Tech. There was about probably 90% of the game where it was like, oh, Georgia's losing this game. It's not even a question. Yeah. But they found a way to win. And that is a credit to Kirby Smart, to Carson Beck, who is a absolute dog, no pun intended, but he is a great player when he needs to be. So I think the question is this. What's that coming down the track? Somebody do it. Somebody do it. Somebody do it. Somebody do it.
We're going Texas.
Oh, yeah, we're all Texas.
You all suck. Okay, well,
if you were at game day, maybe they'd do it.
McAfee would have done it for me.
McAfee would have
done it for me.
The people in the back had to chant it. And then
Yeah, okay. Well, I've got Georgia winning this one for both personal and just football reasons. I think you beat them once at their place. You're not going to lose at home. You have the recipe to beat them. And while Texas's O-line has looked a little bit better since they played Georgia, they haven't played Georgia. They haven't played a front the Georgia caliber. Georgia's defense was never a question this entire season. It was, is Carson Beck the guy? And right now, it looks like he's turned the corner and will be. And I don't see Georgia losing in Atlanta. And more importantly, getting into Clemson SMU later, I think Texas losing puts them at a 5 seed, and I think that a 12 seed could be headed down there.
I think it is tough though to sit there and it's tough for me to even say I trust Carson Beck. Like, I get it. It's a rivalry week. It's rivalry.
I can't say it.
It's Georgia Tech. You throw everything out the window in a rivalry week.
Sure.
Clemson, South Carolina was a perfect example. Every other brawl you saw was a perfect example of that. But I don't know how you can see that rivalry week, see how he played in the first half, and then somehow squeaked out after miscues by Georgia Tech. Like, they didn't win the game. Georgia Tech lost it, is like the way I watched that game. I don't know if they can do that because you lost it to Ole Miss. You come back, you get a game, okay, you go into Georgia Tech, and then you escape with a win.
Let me ask you this.
It's just going to be tough.
Let me ask you this. Did you watch the Texas A&M game? The Texas
Texas A&M game was a very similar one because they started throwing the ball away, and there was a turnover in the pick six, and it kind of went downhill.
Okay. Here's the thing with Texas. When they needed points, who was on the field?
Arch.
It wasn't Quinn Ewers.
Not Quinn.
And they are not going to make the decision to start Arch Manning for the SEC championship. They're going to start Quinn Ewers the same way they did against Georgia the first time. They are going to be in a hole the same way they did for the first time because Georgia knows how to beat the Texas defense. That's the other thing I think we've forgotten, is Georgia moved the ball like water on a river, water in a river, when they played Texas. I mean, it was effortless. They have the keys to beat that defense, and I don't think they are going to be able to adjust for what it's a nice chess match. And Kirby Smart is a pretty darn good chess player.
So
it's like a variation.
Steve Sarkisian might be a better chess player than Kirby.
It's a variation of Alabama, Georgia, because Steve Sarkisian is from the Nick Saban.
It kind of is. It's
like they're both Nick Saban coaching tree, but it's kind of another.
Right.
It's the new Alabama, Georgia.
But here's the problem. It's the old guard who's been dominating college football for the last 5 years, versus a team that was dormant since they had won it in 2006. And Vince Young days. And now, finally, they can truthfully say they're back.
That's truly the name of the.
But
Continue.
are they back? But, I mean, yeah, exactly. It's are they really back? Because they're saying they're back, but the last big game they had was Georgia. They lost that. The big game they had before that in Washington, they lost that. Because Quinn Ewers did not play well. Quinn Ewers didn't play well against Georgia. Quinn Ewers, for as much hype as he gets, and obviously there's a lot of hype around Arch Manning to replace him, Quinn Ewers does not play well in big games.
He doesn't.
Carson Beck in big games does show up. Sometimes it takes him a little while.
I wonder if Quinn learned it from Ryan Day. Quinn was under Ryan Day for 2 years. I wonder if
Quinn might have learned from Ryan Day. We might
think
have
it's
to
I'll
blame
be
him
so
on that.
fast. And I'll say this real quick, too. I think Quinn Ewers and Archie Manning remind me kind of Jalen Hurts and Tua a million years ago and stuff against Georgia. I would love to see that. I would love to see it halftime.
That would be.
Or see the Tua thing, because it's a stable quarterback that's been in the program for a while versus the sexier backup that's younger and
that would
be better. Yeah,
the
that'd be so fun.
I feel like the last thing I'm going to say is that it usually
That's
we
all
see
I
this
gotta say.
game and it's like between which quarterback plays better. But it seems like for this game, it's not which. It's is Carson Beck going to be good or not? Like, is he going to be the Carson Beck we know him to be, the championship caliber, not winning, but championship caliber Carson Beck that can lead this Georgia team or not? It's not really dependent on Quinn Ewers. It's dependent on how good Carson Beck can be, which is crazy to say because Quinn Ewers is still a very vital piece to that section.
I think the only thing that's ironic about this is no matter what, both these teams are in the playoff.
Yeah.
So this game means so much, but so little at the same time.
It's such a
Like
big
Texas,
conversation.
if they lose, they're getting a home game regardless. And Georgia, if they lose, they'll go
still
on the
in.
road,
Both these
probably
teams are
up
going to get a
north.
home game if they win.
Yeah.
Both teams.
Oh, for
I think
first round.
I think no matter.
I think you can
draw,
make an argument Georgia still deserves a home game if they
can-
lose this game
yeah.
because
You can
they
draw
beat
bracket.
Texas earlier this season at Texas. That's going to hold a lot of weight because if you go 1-1 against them, they're going to set it up so round 3 takes place.
and
in
one
the
was
playoff.
actually like neutral.
Right.
Neutral. So
Neutral.
technically you were
But-
1-0 their place.
Obviously, the most important factor in all of this is my hatred for Texas. So with that said,
Noted.
go Dogs.
I think that the stage is going to be set for this game that you're going to see two teams on the other side of the playoff and you're going to expect them to meet in the final. That's what I see what's happening with this game. Essentially, a home game for Georgia, right? They're in Atlanta. I mean, you've seen how Georgia fans have moved to Atlanta in those big games. And they've had Texas's number, like we said earlier, like all these guys have said. And it's just a matter of who can play better in that game. Is it going to be Quinn Ewers? Is it going to be the guy that's been able to step up, has a guy looking down his throat, trying to take his job? Or is it going to be the guy that was supposed to be the top guy out of the NFL draft, Carson Beck, and he just has not played like that, but he's a chance to redeem it in the postseason. So we'll see what's going to be happening there. Speaking of teams that are taking over the new guard, let's talk about the only undefeated team left in the country, and that is the #1 Oregon Ducks. We're going to Indy now. The Oregon Ducks, after Ohio State's crazy loss to Michigan, which I thought was outrageous, especially with it being in Columbus. Excuse me. Here comes Penn State now, number 3rd in the country. Again, only lost to Ohio State, but haven't really played anybody. Who takes it?
Can I hit y'all with a little bit of a hot take? It's a little silly. I think Oregon's like the only good team in college football this year. Like the only like when it comes to like if you talk like Clemson, Alabama, if you're talking like last year, Michigan and stuff, like there's one like team where I don't look at, I'm kind of like, eh.
There's a team that stands out.
Like, yeah,
just because of the way they
exactly.
play.
Yeah, I
And
feel like
I 100%
this
agree.
year there could be a one-team playoff, and I wouldn't be mad in terms of deserving of the championship. Like Oregon, you know, we went back to the 1940s. We just awarded to one. Yeah, like every other team, there's some kind of like ugly aspect to how they got there that kind of makes me go like, like them in the championship. Oregon's the only one, which is why I mean this is so quick. I mean, you know, Penn State, it'd be hilarious if they won. Because, like, you know, they're, like, I don't know, it would be funny, but I don't think it's going to happen. Dylan Gabriel's great, and they're just way better on both sides of the ball. I think they're better coached, even though I love James Franklin, kind of, you know. Two teams known for choking in big games, but Penn State's way more infamous for it. So, yeah, give me the Ducks. I think this is the only game where I'd be surprised if it was close. Every other game, if it's close, I'd be like, of course. This game, I'd be a little surprised, yeah.
I'm going to side with you, and I'm actually going to add on to your hot take.
All right.
Give it a hotter one. So I got Oregon Ducks winning this one. I think that this is the most underrated #1 seed, arguably in history of college football.
It's a long
They are
history.
12-0.
Yeah.
Usually we have 2, 3, 4 undefeated teams. They're the only undefeated team left, including when you want to go back, look back at like Army, Navy. All of them are done. All of them are zipped. They have at least one loss, except Oregon. And no one's talking about it. Everyone's talking about Alabama, who's not even possibly going to make it to the playoffs. Miami, not probably going to make it to the playoffs. Ole Miss, South Carolina, you got Georgia, who will make it, but Texas. Like, all these teams have at least one loss. Oregon has stayed perfect. I think they're going to continue to stay perfect, and I'm just shocked that they're not talking about it. They're not talking about the
They
kids from
deserve
Eugene.
so much more recognition. Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy to me. But I do have Oregon winning this one. It might be like a 10-point game. I think it's going to be like
What's the spread?
middle ground, close, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not going to be 3 points, but it's not going to be like 15-20. It's somewhere in between, but Oregon's going to be able to pull it off. They've looked unstoppable. Yes, they've been slowed down, but they haven't been stopped, and I think that will continue.
My board's a little dramatic, but I put the Penn State downfall with a smiley face because, I mean, Drew Allard, I always think that Drew Allard is very overrated as a quarterback. And I've said it to you multiple times off the panel, and I've given my reasons. But for Penn State, I believe this is just one hurdle too many for them. I mean, we've talked about it all season. When's the Penn State loss going to be? When's the Penn State loss going to be? When's the Penn State loss going to be? This is going to be their second one, I believe, and Oregon are going to take this one.
Please pick Penn State.
Do it.
I mean, to add the pressure, I have Oregon as well.
No, I would just
Sweeping it.
I just want to take a moment to recall something that was said a little while ago about Penn State, and specifically about Drew Allard. Toby once said that Drew Allard is a top 5 quarterback in college football.
Did say
That statement was true for a while, and I think statistically,
I was on the panel for that.
I think statistically he still might be. However, there is a quarterback that is better on the other side of the ball. There is a running back that is better than Nicholas Singleton on the other side of the ball. There is a coach that is a million times better than James Franklin on the other side of the ball. The two best coaches in football, and I will debate on this, I know we're not talking NFL, but the two best coaches in football both have the name Dan. Dan Lanning and Dan Campbell. Because Dan Lanning has created Oregon into a monster.
I love Dan Campbell.
They are winning in Indianapolis. It's not going to be close. Oregon's offense is the most explosive in the country. Evan Stewart is an absolute speed demon along with Tez Johnson. They've got a great tight end in Terrence Ferguson. They've got an elite quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, who didn't play like it at OU, but since coming to Oregon with all the weapons he has, he's played outstanding. And more importantly, they have the most important piece, the kingpin, which is Dan Lanning. He knows the rule book better than we know ourselves. And I feel like if in some crazy world this ends up being a close game, he'll do something that none of the country will anticipate, and they'll find a way to win it. But it's not going to be close. Oregon wins by a lot.
I think it's funny because that Drew Aller stat, at that same time, there was a guy over in Annapolis, Maryland, 45 minutes from my house, which is kind of cool. He was, I think, the best quarterback at the time over Cam Ward, guy from Navy. So I don't know how trustworthy the stats were at that time.
Stats in college
I
football,
find that hilarious.
so dumb.
Yeah.
Random people in there.
I don't like college
you had
football stats
Indiana,
at all.
Navy, and Penn State having 3 of the top 5 quarterbacks at that time. Which is hilarious.
Here's what makes Penn State look worse than they probably are. They lost to Ohio State.
Yeah.
And Ohio State got exposed on Saturday playing Michigan. They could not move the ball to save their life. And when they did, they gave it right back to Michigan. They deserved to lose that game. So losing to Ohio State looks worse for Penn State. Penn State is not as bad as this game will suggest that they are.
Yeah.
Penn State is going to be a playoff team. They will probably, depending on how bad it is, they may be dropped out of a spot for a home game at Beaver Stadium. We'll see.
I think they will be. I think
But-
it's likely. And they'll get kicked.
I think
hope not, though. Their
they'd
home
have
field
to.
is incredible.
They would have to get killed for 4 quarters. It'd have to be Arizona State, Arizona type game for it to be enough to really drop them out. So I think Oregon takes care of business. They're 13-0. They're 12-0 for the first time since 2010, and this is Penn State's first time even in Indianapolis since 2016. They're not going to be ready for the Ducks.
And I think
You got it.
I was going to say, I also think Penn State, as much as we talk, because they aren't on the level of Oregon, but I do think they are capable of winning at least 1 playoff game, if not 2, depending on who they're matched up with.
2.
Here's what's a little bit.
2 is questionable, but 1 I think they could. They have like a 60% chance to win 1 game.
Here's what's a little bit sneaky. Number 1, if they have a home game, it will be a whiteout, and whoever goes is losing.
Yeah.
You're not going to win a Penn State whiteout in the first game of the college football playoff in this new era.
Yeah.
That's not
They
happening.
need a home game, man.
But with that being said, I feel like Oregon is a team that's just, from the time they joined the conference, from the time the Duck was tweeting in August, that we're going to Indianapolis, these guys just knew they would be here. There was something about this team, and it didn't show the first few weeks of the season. They were kind of trying to figure everything out. The first 3-4 weeks, it was why is Oregon even ranked as high as they are? Because they're not this good. And then all of a sudden, a switch flipped. And ever since, they have dominated everybody except Wisconsin. But I'll ask you this. When was the last time a national champion or a national champion contender didn't have 1 or 2 close games in a season? It happens.
No one's perfect.
It happens. So, exactly. No one's perfect. They have a perfect record. They are not a perfect team. They can get beat. Penn State is not the team to beat them.
Since we all picked Oregon, they're favored by 3.5. Is anyone taking Penn State with that spread?
No.
No,
No.
I'm not either.
No, I'm not.
I don't
Which
think-
means
I'm
you probably stay away because that's too
It
comfortable.
will
Yeah,
probably
that's
be
a
more
stay
Penn State.
away.
It's crazy, too, because we also talked this entire
agreed,
time
man.
about
That's good
Oregon,
enough,
and we did not bring up their defense. Their defense
It's
is
good.
really, really good.
I'm excited to see
And we did not bring them up.
I'm
Like,
excited to see
at
the
all.
factors in the SEC
I
program.
think the interesting factor, and this is really my last thing, is how many Penn State fans actually show up because it's closer. Who's going to pack it? Is
who
it
wants to
gonna
pay
be neutral?
$19?
It's $19.
It's $20.
I'll wear a Penn State shirt.
It's $20. Is it going to be a bunch of Ohio
The
State
Penn
whiteout?
State
I don't
shirt.
know.
The Penn State shirt would cost more than the ticket to the game.
Yes, a white T-shirt in that area will cost $55. Walmart should just up those prices. White T-shirts that day. Yeah, $50.
I think the best part about or probably the most important thing about this game is that both these teams are in the playoffs already. I mean, Oregon's undefeated. If they lose this game, they're going to be put at the 5 seed and host a first-round game. No matter what, they're going to be fine. Penn State is kind of where all the questions come in. Well, let's see. How much do they lose by? If they lose by a lot, do they get a home game? If they don't, I mean, at the end of the day, they're still a one-loss team. They're going to be in the playoff. I think you can begin to see those teams that are guaranteed. But 2 teams that aren't guaranteed, I believe one should be guaranteed, is the ACC championship game between Clemson and SMU. Now, I know this is a game near and dear, close to our heart. I'm sure all of you guys either attended or watched the game against South Carolina, that big Palmetto Bowl game. That broke a lot of hearts. I was there firsthand. But this is a chance for redemption. All you got to do is win and you're in, and SMU can do the same thing. SMU undefeated in the ACC. Clemson had that one loss, and then a little help from Syracuse, and here they are, back in Charlotte, and one of the best teams in winning the ACC championship are facing the new kid on the block. So, I mean, again, this could probably be the final spot in the college football playoff. Again, you'll have 4 or 5 teams watching, especially if there's a team that loses big in these conference championship games. But at the end of the day, who wins the ACC championship?
I said this to you off the air. I don't think anyone's been gift-wrapped a better opportunity to go to the playoffs than Clemson. I mean, like, they really said, like, you can lose all of your ranked matchups, and then you can additionally get one bonus unranked loss at home, and you're still just going to be 1 game away. Against, like, I mean, SMU's good, but it's a relatively winnable game for sure. I think that, like, I believe in higher powers and stuff, in college football especially. And I believe in jinxing teams. So I wrote down SMU with quotations around it. All right, I'm not going to say that I think Clemson's going to win, but I'm going to tell y'all that Dabo has a lot of experience in these big games. He has been able to perform. Not this season, absolutely not, but in postseason games, he's been able to perform. He's been able to have Clemson elevate beyond their skill level, going back till I was 9 years old. This is SMU's first year in a power, I guess now 4 conference or power conference. I don't think they'll be ready. I think they're incredibly reliant on their offense. I think our defense can slow them down. I think that if Cade can just manage the game well, which he's done most of the season, maybe not recently, especially not against South Carolina, but I mean, he's so close. I think he delivers. I mean, that West Coast slant, I mean, if they overthrew, if he threw that and hit him, that would have been a touchdown. That's been, when I try to go to sleep the last couple of nights, that's the play that's been bringing it in my head, you know? So I think he'll fine tune it. I think postseason Cade will become a thing because we're able to do that, and I picked SMU. So, yeah.
So is it SMU or Clemson?
I'm picking SMU.
He's
To
picking
win.
SMU.
I believe in jinxing, man. I'm reverse jinxing.
So he's picking SMU and hoping he loses.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's no way they lose.
SMU with
lost
quotes
to
on
South
like
Carolina.
this.
I mean, to be fair, Griffin, Toby, and I all did that with Carolina last week, and unfortunately, we were right. So,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, there's no way they lose.
Same thing with Miami.
yeah,
The same thing with Miami.
yeah.
I've been called crazy on this show multiple times for my hot takes.
Because you're crazy.
I am.
Bijan was
I
one
own
of
it up. But you got to give me credit when credit's due.
Nah, yeah.
I called the A&M South Carolina game. I said South Carolina would beat them. I said A&M would lose, and you guys all looked at me crazy. I said Missouri would keep it a close game with South Carolina. They did. It was 4 points. And I said for 3 weeks straight, way before at the beginning of November, that Syracuse was going to beat Miami in the Dome, and guess what happened? The Tigers are back, and they're going to make it to the playoffs. I'm calling it right now. They are winning the playoff. Not winning the playoff, sorry. They're making it to the playoffs. They're winning the championship. I'm not that crazy. They're winning the ACC. I think they will take this. And I had to do a little bit of research, which I was excited to do because this is an interesting one. If you look at SMU's schedule, this is where I'll start off, and I'll try to keep this as quick as possible so I'm not taking over the whole segment. Their best game, not best win, their best game, this is SMU, was a BYU team in SMU, and they lost 18-15. SMU was ranked at the time, I believe it was like 13th, 15th, something like that in the teens. And SMU, I think, was ranked in the 20s at that time. It was like week 4. Their best games, if you want to talk about wins, that was their best game, no, undoubtedly. Their best win would either be arguably Louisville, Duke, or Pitt.
It's not Duke. Or it's Louisville.
But that's how bad their schedule is.
Louisville's a lot
That's how
better than
low
Duke.
their competition
Yes.
was that could be argued as their best game because it was an overtime win at Duke, which can be arguably a tough place to play. Their one against Pitt was at SMU. They won 48-25. Their one against Louisville was at Louisville, 34-27. And their one at Duke was overtime, 28-27. They have not played as high of competition as you might think. They almost equally play the same, if not a little bit worse competition than Clemson has. Clemson has played
We've
2 ranked
lost
teams.
to all our competition, but yes, we did play them. Yeah.
BYU has played 2 ranked teams, one of which is not ranked anymore. That's Louisville. Louisville was ranked 22nd when they played them in Louisville. And then they beat them by 7.
Yeah.
If you look more into it, Clemson, if you go to team rankings, this is what I use to look at it. Clemson is higher ranked on the defensive side rushing-wise, because that's where SMU goes. SMU is a very good rushing team.
They are.
Clemson is 1 spot higher than BYU rushing-wise, and BYU was able to slow down that rushing attack. In the BYU game, their dual-threat quarterback, Kevin Jennings, he had, as I can read here, he was 15 for 32.
How do you read that? Your brightness is
I know,
all the way down.
it's really down.
All
yeah.
right.
46.9% completion percentage. That's what their quarterback had. He had 0 touchdowns and an interception. He had 140 yards passing, 9 carries, 38 yards rushing, no touchdowns. That was their quarterback. Their running back came back, had 14 attempts, 75 yards on a 5 average, with 0 rushing touchdowns, and he had 4 receptions, 21 yards, and 2 fumbles lost. Clemson is, I wouldn't say great. They're good at causing turnovers. Yeah. They somehow find a way to get it. They had 3 last week. I think against SMU, Clemson can find a way to slow down that run, especially because Peter Woods is healthy. And when Peter Woods is healthy, we have a much better run defense. I think we will find a way to slow down their running. Will we completely huddle them out of the end zone? I don't think so. I don't think it will be a SMU 18-15 type game. But I do think we can slow them down enough where our offense can pick up on the passing wise. Because SMU is a top 10 rush defense. We have not rushed well. We didn't rush well against South Carolina. But we can pass. When we get that deep ball, that ball to Wesco, that ball to more open, we can get really good and we can get up and we can jump on teams really early. And I think that will happen. So for that reason, I have Clemson winning ACC, and I have us getting a first-round bye, which that can go in later.
Talk about that in a second.
One pet peeve of mine I hate talking about the team that I support, like whether they win or whether they win or lose a game or not, because I don't want to jinx them. But on my board, I have coin flip, and I have, in quotes, same odds as U of FC. Because in the U of FC, what was our spread again? What was it, 1.5?
I think it was 1.5.
In favor of us?
I think it ended up going up to maybe 3.
Yeah, I think
because of home
yeah,
field.
I think
it was less than a field goal.
I feel like
that's 2.5. Yeah.
I feel like that's the exact odds that we have against SMU. I think the spread is, except it might be swayed towards SMU. I would say it's a 1.5 spread.
I think it's 2.5 towards SMU right now.
It's 2.5 towards SMU.
That makes
Clemson
perfect.
opens as a 2.5 point.
I'm not driving to North Carolina for that one.
That makes perfect sense. I believe that, as Brian said, the deep ball threat to Wesco is truly very important for Clemson to be looking to if we are going to win this game. And I believe that we will come away with this one. We will have our first notably big win of the season. And we will be headed to hopefully a first-round bye. I mean, maybe, depending on Boise State, depending on what goes on in that department. Hopefully we get a first-round bye after winning this game.
So, SMU's 4th in the nation in rushing defense. 4th. Mm-hmm. That's pretty impressive. Yeah. Against a senior running back who really didn't even do much against Carolina, whose run defense is nowhere near as good. SMU, we are not going to be able to run the ball, period. So it comes down to, can Cade Klubnik outduel Kevin Jennings?
Exactly.
Kevin Jennings, I'm glad you brought up that BYU game. That was his first ever collegiate game. Cade's first ever collegiate game was the 2022 ACC Championship against North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And he balled out. But since then, he's kind of been on a slide. He has not been as great. Kevin Jennings, on the other hand, has entered a new gear since that game. He is among the top quarterbacks in college football, certainly from a dual threat perspective. And I'm glad you brought up their schedule. Louisville, on the road, beat them. Did Clemson beat Louisville?
No.
We lost.
We lost.
Did we play at Louisville?
No, we played at home.
Oh, we played here and lost. Oh, that's not good.
Shut up.
They played Duke. At Duke.
Sorry.
That game went to overtime. SMU turned the ball over 5 times. Who won that game?
They still won.
SMU did win at the end.
So SMU can win pretty, and they can win ugly. SMU is not getting near enough credit for the work that they've done this season from joining the ACC and being picked. I think they were 8th or something like that preseason.
Yeah,
they were gonna be middle of the pack, and they've come in and run the ACC.
They're 8th overall. Yeah, they went from
Clemson, on the other hand,
8th to 8th.
Yeah.
was supposed to be here. The preseason matchup was this and Florida State, us and Florida State. And Clemson played their way out of it against Louisville. We should have been dead against Louisville. We needed absolute chaos to ensue for us to even have a chance. Well, then chaos ensued.
and his name is
Then we had a chance against South Carolina to prove, okay, we can beat a ranked team. We can secure an at-large spot. We can be believable as a postseason contender. And we couldn't beat South Carolina. So why on earth would I believe that we can beat SMU? The answer, divine intervention.
Yeah, God loves us.
It is as simple as that. If you've been dead for 5 weeks which Clemson has. There's no reason Clemson should have been in the ACC championship or had a shot at the college football playoff. But somehow everything has unfolded perfectly where Clemson can have 3 losses that all really don't look great and be in contention for not only just the college football playoff, for a conference championship and for a first-round bye. Unreal stuff. You look at this Clemson team. We talk about their reluctance to use the transfer portal. Does that change this offseason? If they don't make the playoff, I think it does. But if somehow, despite all this, they find their way in, I don't think it does, because the argument is we made the playoff. And maybe, just maybe, this Clemson team slides into the playoff at 12, plays Texas, which I brought up a little earlier in this show, plays the Horns in Austin. For one, I'd love that. I could go to the game very easily. But 2, Clemson has no business being here, which means they have nothing to lose. And the most dangerous team in college football is a team with nothing to lose. Carolina didn't have anything to lose when they played us. They weren't in the playoff guaranteeing they beat us. Their goal was solely to play spoiler, and they had it till Syracuse helped us out. You look at Clemson. They have absolutely nothing to lose. The expectations are incredibly low for this game. Everybody's thinking SMU is going to roll us. We don't belong, all of that. But somehow, Clemson is here. Somehow, Clemson is back to the place where they don't lose. They're 8-1 in ACC championships in the last 10 years when they've made it. You look at this Clemson team, and it has no business being in the playoff. This is one of the worst Clemson teams we've seen, certainly in the 2020s, but go back to even the 2010s. This is the least deserving team to go to the playoff, period. We're not even talking one loss Notre Dame when they made it a few times. We're not talking Cincinnati. Clemson has no business being in this playoff. But somehow, divine intervention has kept us in. And I'm crazy enough to think it's going to happen again Saturday night. And somehow, Clemson's going to squeak out a win against SMU. And even crazier, that will look bad enough where SMU falls all the way out, which they should not. SMU is a playoff team. They have looked absolutely great. They've had one bad game. It was BYU with a guy who played his first ever collegiate game, and they lost by 3. This SMU team should roll Clemson. But somehow, Clemson's going to win this game. I can't explain it. It's just going to happen.
That's exactly how I feel, honestly, because, I've watched this. Since when I was born, I started to go to every home game and stuff. And God does love Clemson more than any other school. We've been spoon-fed every opportunity this season. I think we have the easiest path to the playoffs. And then real quick, we never fail to win. We won 10 games every year in the 2010s. So, since 2010. So this is definitely our worst season in 15 years, I think, unless last year was maybe a little bit worse, But, I think that's honestly exactly how I feel. I just don't want to say it. We always win these games. We never lose these games. We lose recently. We've lost some dumb games in the regular season. But when we get to this point, we're the 20-6 when Georgia's playing Georgia Tech, and it's God, Georgia's probably going to come back. That is us.
This is as simple as history is the only thing on our side. If you look at every metric whatsoever, SMU should absolutely destroy us. Not to mention, SMU, the last time they were in a conference championship was last year. They won the American Conference before moving into the ACC. So they've been here before. They know how to win conference championships. But this is a team that's been to national championships. Not with the players that they have now, but a coach that knows how to win this game. A coach that has, I think, the second best all-time record in this game. In ACC championship games, I'm pretty sure.
He does.
It just sets up so perfectly. And I'll close with this because this is the best last laugh ever for Clemson fans. Clemson winning this game means Clemson is in the playoff. And Clemson winning this game means Carolina's out. And Carolina beat
stupid. I love that so much.
That is the ultimate last laugh, and that is going to make Carolina fans absolutely riot. Because their complete argument is they don't belong. They couldn't even beat us. But somehow, thanks to the way the system was created, little old Clemson has a chance to shock the world again.
On a point.
This is just crazy. You guys are all sitting here we shouldn't deserve it. Somehow, someway, we still win games. And for that reason, we are in the playoffs. Yes, his first game was BYU. Understandable. You're going to be shocked. You're going to be shaky, all that. When he played Louisville, who is even worse than BYU defensively, he still didn't really perform up to standard. And that was 4 or 5 weeks in. So I don't think he's going to come out and just shock the world. They don't have a receiver. They have 2 receivers that have 5 touchdowns. Besides that, none of their receivers other than one has surpassed 500 yards. He has 502. 5 of them have surpassed 350. The rest are all below. They don't really have a passing attack that is as good, and if they did, Clemson's pass game is very good. Their DBs are young, they're sophomores, they're freshmen, and they know how to play. Dabo will have them ready for the playoffs, which I understand. You're with Clemson, so I'm not getting directly mad at you, but I just think that we're all sitting here like, oh my gosh, we don't deserve this. We do. We found a way to win the games. We found a way to get in. And if you erase the South Carolina game, just completely erase it, we wouldn't be saying this. It was just because we had a sour.
I would still be saying it because Miami.
it.
The only reason we're in this position is because we got help.
We just had to beat a ranked
we
team.
had a chance to control our destiny, fumbled it, and we needed other people to help us. And
Thank
Fran
you,
Brown,
Auburn. Thank you, Auburn.
But we
Fran
still
Brown,
had ourselves we still put ourselves in position to even earn it in the first place. We could have lost it weeks ago.
What we all need to do when we finish recording is write thank you notes to Fran Brown because that's the only reason we are in this game. Shout out to Syracuse, Kyle McCord, you're my hero, all that. But we knew Miami was fraudulent. Clemson is too, but somehow I just feel like it's divine intervention. It's as simple as that.
Well, let's go to the next segment of the show really quickly. It's a really quick element. I know that the college football pick'ems were the big thing, but let's talk about the teams that are not going to be selected into the college football playoff because of all of this. So I know in years past when I've been on the show that you've done your 4-team playoff, but I generally don't think that's possible to show a 12-team bracket in the span of a whiteboard. So I'm going to rattle off 4 teams that are on the cusp of the college football playoff. Answer in a sentence. Answer in a sentence. I want to see this. First team is Alabama. Currently 11th in the college football playoff, but again, if you have wins from Clemson, if you have wins from maybe Arizona State, I mean, no matter what, a Big 12 championship is going to make it in. But let's say a big team like SMU loses big. Let's say Georgia gets blown out. Let's say something hectic goes on. Will Alabama make the college football playoff on Sunday? Buy or sell?
They're going to make the playoff, even though they shouldn't, because the whole myth of it's better to lose early than late doesn't matter if you're Alabama.
I like that.
No, because although it is very good for marketing, they don't deserve it.
I'm saying sell, but they're the CFP sweethearts, so they shouldn't make it. I don't think they will make it, but they're going to be probably having a good chance because of CFP.
The outcome of the games don't matter with Alabama. They just get in. So, yeah, win or lose, yeah, it doesn't matter. They don't keep score with Alabama. I don't think they look at the score when they watch games.
That's fair. Well, okay, let's look at it this way. If you look at the AP poll right now, we got Oregon, most likely in, Texas in, Penn State in, Notre Dame in, Georgia, most likely in, Tennessee, don't have to play, they're in. Ohio State, do not have to play, they're in. Indiana, do not have to play. In? We agree? Indiana? In?
I think
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Boise State, most likely win. We all had them on the panel. In? Correct. You have that Big 12 championship. So, again, that's 10 teams. And then you have SMU. If Clemson win, Clemson make it. Do you think SMU remains as a team? SMU? Okay.
Yeah.
So that means if the only way that any of these teams could show something is if Clemson loses, or if there is something crazy that goes on in this playoff, which I don't think will. But let's go to our next team, and that is the team that just beat us, the South Carolina Gamecocks, who have the wins. They did beat ranked teams, but they have also only lost to ranked teams. They lost to Ole Miss, they lost to LSU in a game that I believe they should have won, and they lost to Alabama by 2 points in Tuscaloosa. But they have the wins. But what do you guys think? A sentence again.
They should, because they've won 7 straight games and have beat a host of good teams, but they're not going to.
I will never say yes to the Gamecocks. Tigers will knock them out.
I'm going to say sell or no. They're not going to make it. There's too many teams that beat other teams right above them. Alabama, Tennessee is a very fine example of that. Don't think they'll make it.
They played a game and they kept score, and then the teams we're talking about scored more points than them and beat them. So I don't know why they would ever make it.
Okay, this is another one I think that is a little bit more on the easier side, but this is a team that has incredible wins, and that's Ole Miss. They got the win against Georgia, which I think is the most important thing to keep in mind. But again, They've lost games that they shouldn't have lost. They lost to Kentucky. I believe that was at home, too. They lost to Florida at Florida, which was a team that was down in the dirt. Ole Miss, I believe I'm going to see a consensus no here, but what do you guys think?
I think of these 4 teams, Ole Miss has the best resume. They also have the worst reputation for losing big games, for choking when they're in a position to be successful. So because of that, no.
I have what he said because I agree with Jackson. Absolutely, they aren't the big market team, and there's another team with a better resume that we'll get to.
I'm saying sell, so no. They're above South Carolina, behind Alabama, and Alabama's behind Tennessee, who's going to make the 11th spot.
They should dress up in crimson because I think the committee, when it comes to Alabama, is stupid. It might think they're Alabama and put them in. But, yeah, I don't think they deserve to be either because of the team we're about to talk about.
And that team that we're about to talk about is the third ACC team that is not going to see the ACC championship and are not in control of their own destiny anymore, and that's Miami. 2 losses, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, 2 of the more better teams in the ACC, but they lost both away. They did beat Florida. I believe that was in the Swamp too, correct? Blew them out of the Swamp. First game of the year, which really put the world on notice because you had the whole transfer portal, Cam Ward, what's he going to look like, whatnot. But again, is this Miami team have any opportunity to sneak in? Do you guys believe that this team will sneak in? What do you guys think?
Can I make a little bit of a lengthier point on this one?
You guys can go
three
lengthier.
sentences?
Okay.
Yeah.
3 sentences.
All right, then I got you. It'll probably be like 6.
All right.
First sentence is you better not. Second is you shouldn't reward a team that doesn't have a defense. And third, and most importantly, they lost late. Bad thing to do.
I put you are in question mark, and then I put in quotations, please no. Cam Ward's amazing. I hope Giants draft him. And, yeah, I would pick Miami out of these 4 teams.
You still have one more sentence. You want any other sentence?
I'm good.
Okay.
I have no. I'll give you my little
You get 4.
12 team right quick. It's going to be 1 sentence. Oregon, Texas, Boise State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Georgia, Ohio State, Penn State, SMU, Indiana, Tennessee, Iowa State. With those in there, they have better wins. They're going to be above Alabama. Miami's going to fall out.
You just ignored your bubble, or you just ignored his bubble. Perfect. I said earlier, a hot take, whatever. Oregon's the only good team. I want to expand on that a little bit. That was the intention of that take a little earlier. I think Miami's just as fraudulent as every other team that we're talking about in contention. I think there's one team that Miami's a fraud. There's one team that isn't a fraud. It's Oregon. And every other team is just an ugly 10 or 11 win team. So I wrote everyone's fake nowadays. And I think that, they're just as good. That 2 to 15, I think it's so interchangeable. And when the eye test, no one amazes any more than any other team. I don't think they're significantly worse than Alabama or Ole Miss. They're 10-2. Strength of schedule is tough, but that's more than 3 or whatever.
No, you're all good because I'm going to give you this final question,
Okay.
and then we'll probably head out. Out of these 4 teams, let's say there is something big that goes on. Let's say the number one thing, let's say Clemson loses, right? There is a spot open. And right now, according to how it looks, it would be Alabama. They are at 11. They are the higher seed compared to South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Miami. If that one spot is open, that at-large bid is open compared to what you said, Brian. Let's say Clemson loses, right?
Yeah.
Who would hypothetically take that spot? Who do you guys think should be that team? First of all, who do you think should be, and who will be? Because I know that our minds and the committee's minds are differently. Y'all are good to speak on whatever you'd like.
Okay. So I think it should be South Carolina. I think they started 3-3. You lost 2 games because your quarterback got hurt in both of them in LSU, and he was out for a brief stint during the Alabama game where they came back and lost by a missed 2-point conversion. You look at Alabama, though. They have a history. They are notorious for being in the college football playoff, for being very, very close to it. Now that it's even bigger, you really think they're going to find a way to leave Alabama out? I don't think so.
The second most thing that I hate is talking about the committee because it can go either way. But when Alabama's involved, I think it'll be a rock, paper, scissors between Alabama and Miami for the spot.
I have should be Miami, will be Alabama. We all know it's going to be Alabama for the views. But when you look at the 4 teams that we just discussed, when you rank them, like if I were to rank these teams, Tennessee goes in the 11, like I said, because then I think the Big 12 will go in the 12th spot because they'll be probably the lowest ranked out of all the conference champions. But Alabama goes above Ole Miss. Ole Miss goes above South Carolina, and Miami goes above all of them because they only have 2 losses. Alabama's looks worse. They have 2 unranked. South Carolina looks worse. LSU became unranked. And then you look at it, and now Ole Miss also lost unranked. So for that reason, I have Miami going up. Plus, it's also a feel-good story because you have a Heisman candidate going in. So the committee's going to look at it. That would absolutely be the second team they'd put in if 2 spots open up. It'd be Bama then Miami.
I said this a little off air, but like I think you're sitting inside the bottle and you can't read the label. I mean, you can talk about better losses and like the more recently good team. I mean, we got to see Alabama play South Carolina. I think that's the best way to determine if a team's better in football is when they play a football game and there's players playing games and refs make sure everyone follows the rules and there's millions of witnesses and then the person with the most points wins. And we got to see that, and Alabama won. So I think South Carolina, I don't think they're on the bubble. I don't think they should be in. I completely agree with that. I think it should be Miami. I see the Alabama take, but absolutely I think it'll be Alabama. I think the committee should just give them an automatic at-large bid every year. 0-12 or 12-0. Yeah, they're always going to slot them in.
Let me throw one thing in here real quick because this is what happened last year too, right?
Oh, God.
Bama had the big win over Texas had the big win over Bama. That was the biggest considered win of that. I just can't see Alabama not getting in because they have the biggest win out of all of these teams, and that is Georgia. And that is at the beginning of the season that no legacy was tarnished here. Brian, I know you had your finger up.
They also have the
Oh,
biggest
no, I was just going
loss.
to ask because you said you wanted South Carolina, right, Jordan? Like you think
South
they
Carolina
should.
should, yes.
My question is, in the
Why?
scenario Clemson loses, now their win against Clemson is to an unranked team. Does that help them in any way of getting over Alabama? I'm just curious.
That game I don't think matters.
Really?
I think if you look at South Carolina when they started the season versus where they are now, it is a completely
Do
different
you think the
team.
committee's going to think like that, though?
No, they won't.
No, he's saying who he
I think they will to an extent.
I would put in South Carolina because they are a completely different team than what we saw at the beginning of the season. Lenore Sellers has developed, and he is actually a great quarterbaak. I would love it, like if we used the portal, if we went and got him, because people can't tackle
I was
him.
talking to you about
Have
that.
him in Chris
He's 6'2", 240, and you saw it on Saturday, and you've kind of seen it all season. If you've watched South Carolina, you can't tackle him. He doesn't have the best arm in the country, but he's a top dual threat quarterback. Now that like Cam Ward and all them are leaving, because he's so hard to tackle. He's quick and he's big, and people just bounce off of him. And I feel like if you run back South Carolina and Alabama, Alabama's taken a little bit of a shock to the system, and South Carolina is on a roll right now. And Beamer ball is looking good in Columbia. I think Carolina would win if they got to rematch. They won't, but most importantly, allow me to just point out the fact you're saying Miami, you should not even be on this panel.
Why?
Because Miami does not belong.
Carolina.
How did they
but-
lose?
but
They have a
Jordan,
Heisman candidate and
they
an offense that
lost
puts up like
to
40
two
points.
teams.
Yes, they have that name.
Okay, they have Cam Ward. That's it. They have one name. They also have.
They have 3 wide receivers that
have
were
an
considered for the
offense.
Biletnikoff Award, which
Okay.
is the best wide receiver in the nation. 3
Yeah.
of them were considered for that.
They-
and they have 2 running backs that can both go up for 50-plus yards per game.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
maybe that's
everything
offense
you could
also.
say with Miami. Everything on offense.
That's a lot of
They
things.
also have the worst defense in the country.
And what's their record?
Any team that can play defense can beat them.
And what's their record, though?
10-2.
So they can't play defense to control it. You can keep a game close, but like we saw with this entire season, you can't seem to overcome Miami unless you're Syracuse or Georgia Tech.
They had to put up 50, 40 points to
And
win
they
games.
did.
Correct.
And they
They
do
did.
it. And they
And
do
they won
it
it.
against anyone.
Yes.
Right, but they did it against, I wouldn't say anyone. If you put them
I'm saying
in
they
a
could.
They
playoff,
can do it again.
I'm saying they could. I'm not saying they did.
you know what? I hope they do put them in the playoff.
Please.
Because if they get a first-round game, and we watch that over winter break, when we come back next semester, I will be the first to gloat about the fact they lost by 30. Because that
Indiana,
is
to
exactly.
Notre Dame, or Penn
Yes,
State?
they would
So
lose.
Cam-
I think they would get
Indiana.
killed by anybody.
You think
So Cam
Because
Ward,
anybody that can play defense is destroying Miami.
but Cam Ward that has been on fire all season, making these
They played
unbelievable
Virginia.
tosses,
They played
and you're going to
Virginia
say that all of a sudden he hits
They
the
played
playoffs and
Virginia
he's going to
Tech.
die? Like, Cam Ward has been putting up 20, 30 points. He's been leading his team like crazy, throwing for 4,000 yards, set the new record over Vinny Testaverde, who used to hold it. And you're going to sit there and say he's going to go into a playoff game and just lay a goose egg.
I'm not saying he's going to land a goose egg. The problem is if they
lose by
punt,
30.
if they punt twice, they're losing. If
They
he
might not
if he
punt
throws a pick, they're losing. If they make any mistakes whatsoever, they're losing because I'm pretty sure if we got pads on, they couldn't even stop us.
I don't know. I think they have a better shot at making it deeper than South Carolina would.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say quick, too, back to what you were saying earlier. I think, like, college football doesn't have a preseason, and that's kind of annoying. But, like, obviously it can't. But because of that, September football has to matter. I mean, like, you have to look at whoever has the most sustained and complete season and is able to win deserves to go in the playoffs. So, like, teams get better, and that's great. But if you're losing games early and then you find yourself later in the season and it's you and those teams that you already lost to, that's tough. That sucks. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is, though. But I think, like, you know, South Carolina lost to Alabama in a literal game, but hypothetically now I believe that they would probably win. Doesn't mean they should be ahead of Alabama. I mean, I hypothetically think that Clemson would beat Indiana. I don't know if Indiana should be, you know, whatever it's called. Indiana should be ahead of us.
I think Indiana is the most, as we've established over the last few weeks, I think Indiana is certainly the most controversial playoff team.
We're about to take that crown, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah. we will if we
Last
win
point.
Saturday. But I feel like when you look at Miami, they have the most impressive offense and the most disgusting defense. And that's just not a team I want to see in the playoff.
Oh, that's the best team.
It's just tough because the rules, the way the rules have adjusted today, offense beats defense most of the time. If it's fair game, probably not. But with the way the rules are now, it favors the offense so much that you would actually go farther with a more dominant offense than a more dominant defense.
The worst defense, worst offense in the country. If they have the best defense, they would not be 10-2 at all. Yeah, I fully agree.
I think offense is taken as a greater stat at this point in the game, but at the end of the day, are you going to take an SEC team or are you going to take an ACC team that maybe isn't as battle tested? That's how it's going to be at the end of the day. But of course, that's all it's going to do today for today's episode of The Extra Point. It was a long one. We had a lot to talk about. 12-team playoff was quite an enthusiastic topic to talk about, so obviously had to keep it on the longer side, but that is going to do it for today. Special thanks to the panelists. You guys were awesome. Loved hearing what you had to say. As well as everybody in the control room, thank you for everything going on over the course of this semester. I want to say a special thank you to Connor in there. I know that is his last show with The Extra Point. He is graduating this semester, so just want to thank him for everything that he's done. He's been as long as I'm here, so excited to see what he has to do going forward. But until next semester, for all y'all, we'll have more in terms of NFL playoffs, college football playoffs. That will be wrapping up when we get back, and then we'll get into some college hoops, some NBA hoops, and it should be going from there. But for the last time this semester, from Jordan York, Drew Landon, Brian Warner, Caden Hughes, I'm Griffin Barfield. I'll see you later.